In the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples today. Welcome to Totally Lit, the podcast celebrating reading, writing and creating literature. I'm your host, Ky Garvey. Thank you for listening.
K D Aldyn, welcome to Totally Lit.
Thank you. So good to be here.
I'm very excited. I've got a copy of your book sitting here in my office and I'm in love with the cover.
I can take no responsibility for that, unfortunately, but gee, they did a good job.
Would you like to tell me about your book?
I will. So, You Girls Play Knives is my second crime thriller, and it's primarily about female rage and revenge. And that kind of sounds pretty strong, but it is quite strong, the direction that I tend to go in. So basically we have Helen Wyatt has been murdered and her four best friends are absolutely gutted when her killer, Damien Gatner, gets off on technicalities. So he's found not guilty. So then we join the four best friends as they celebrate what would have been Helen's 30th birthday. And they're a few wines down and they start joking about, what they would do to Gatner if they could get these hands on them. And this kind of segues into a more, they each decide to research and present to the group, just their little group of the four of them, the perfect way to kill somebody. And this is all quite harmless, really. They're having a bit of fun with it and it's a way for them to get through their grief. And it is quite harmless until one of the murders is replicated, and then soon after there's another one. So it soon becomes clear that somebody is copying their hypothetical murders, and they have to find out, obviously, who, how, and why. And in that process, there's a lot of secrets come out between the friendship group, and their loyalties might be tested a little bit. It's fair to say there's a fair bit of carnage, really. So
that's an interesting concept. When you want justice in the world, when somebody's been murdered, you want justice for them. But when do you turn into the next criminal?
That's right. And I think this is where, without sort of being too earnest about it, but this is where fiction has a part to play, because when you're kind of feeling like that, a little bit helpless, which I think most of us are these days with, in the political climate, and, has been no reduction in violence against women. So I guess when the tables get turned fictionally, it's kind of a bit cathartic, and it's something that, gives us a bit of a release to be able to read those sort of things. That's just my take on it anyway.
I do love a bit of a twist in the tale, though.
Yeah.
So I love that. I wonder how you've been feeling, because you write in multiple genres. How have you been enjoying getting your revenge in this genre?
Yeah, look, a lot. A lot more than I ever thought I would. And I've sort of, to explain the way that I've ended up here, I guess, because as you say, I do write under the name of Karin Thompson, and I write sort of predominantly to date, have written mainly short stories, but there is some more sort of coming along the way. And the reason why I chose to write as K D Aldyn was that I just didn't want somebody getting confused, and picking up something that I'd written in one genre and then thinking, oh, well, this wasn't what I signed up for, sort of thing. So I thought that was a better way to go. And the publishers kind of agreed with that. So the first one I actually wrote as a challenge, because going way back now to sort of the 90s, when we used to have, I don't know why we always used to have these kind of crazy dinner parties. There had been a book by Shane Stevens called By Reason of Insanity. I think it was written in the 80s, and it was about a serial killer. And there was just this kind of weird conversation around the dinner table about, I was saying that a woman could make a really good serial killer, and everybody was arguing with me. I was kind of on my own over this side of the table. And so I just, as a feminist, felt I like this so I can prove them all wrong. And I basically did that, and I wrote the first one, Sister Butcher Sister, I think it was finished in the early 2000s, and then it sat there because, like a lot of writers, I probably got one or two rejections and then thought, oh, this is no good, put it away and didn't do anything with it. And then, once it was revived all these years later and, a fair bit of rewriting involved and all of that, but the sort of feedback that I got where readers really did love that whole idea of revenge and of turning the tables a little bit, I kind of went with that. And I probably enjoy writing it far more than I should.
You've got to have fun with your writing as well and enjoy what you're doing. And I think that half of that, like, you're driven to get to the end. Like, if you're enjoying the plot and you're planning what you'll do next, I love the idea that it can be fun as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I think sometimes we take ourselves too seriously. We do need to have fun. And if it's not enjoyable, then there's no point in anybody doing it,
Mm-hmm. Now, you've won a few awards as well with some of your other genre writing.
For short stories I have, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I did see that you had won the 2018 Hunter Writer Centre's Grieve competition.
That's right. Yes, I forgot about that one.
I love that one because I placed in that. I came third in 2017. Oh, we're like sisters.
Yeah.
So I wrote a short story that was around my grandmother passing, and that was something that was close to my heart, but it was sort of like a creative non-fiction piece. But yours was in poetry, is that right?
It was, yes. I've won a few sort of minor awards with poetry, and I love writing poetry, and reading poetry. So that's kind of what I do in between times. Or I shouldn't say in between, actually, because someone was asking me the other day, are you reading crime all the time and that sort of thing? I'm actually not, because when I'm sort of really immersed in that darkness, I tend to like to read lighter things. So I will read short stories and I'll read poetry. But it's funny now that I think about it, because I hadn't thought about that poem for a long time. And it was called Hashtag, and it was kind of in relation to the Me Too movement, really. So a little bit like what I was just talking about before, where we like to sort of get a sense of turning the tables. I mean, I guess that's kind of, that was in that sort of sphere as well, of having something to say about being a woman in this day and age, and how do you navigate the dangers and that we have to live with.
It is interesting. I have two sons who they're now adults, but the difference in their thinking to my thinking when they're going out and about and things, because I'm always like, oh, are you safe? Oh, that was a bit dark. I don't think you should be walking there. They're like, Mum, will you chill out? I'm like, well, I can't do that. Like, if I'm going out, I would not just charge off into the night.
No, that's right.
Like, you've got to really think about what you're doing.
Yeah, you have to think, well, what is the lighting like? Who's going to be there? How am I getting from A to B? And in fact, there's some studies, quite a few studies being done about why women are turning to crime fiction and why they like reading crime thrillers and all of that sort of thing. And the astonishing thing to me was, well, there were quite a few answers that the researchers came up with, but two of the main ones that I come to stick in my mind. One was, well, women like to read it because they can empathise with the victim. And the other one was women are surreptitiously, whether consciously or subconsciously, looking for extra ways to protect themselves. And I thought that was really funny, because they're assuming then that the victim is a woman. So to come up with the answers, they're always assuming that the woman is a victim. And so that's kind of why it's nice to be able to just turn the tables a little bit fictionally, I suppose.
And how have you found the difference between writing short form and long form? Like, there's I guess a massive time difference.
Yeah, there is. I think it's just a different, well, especially with the crime thrillers too, you can be a little bit freer, I think, with when you have you're writing a novel or when you're writing a full-length work. I don't spend, I suppose, as long angsting over, one little sentence or one word, especially because when editors become involved, you start to realise you can't get too protective of various things anyway. Whereas when you're writing a short story, I think often you have a deeper ownership of it. You're probably less, because you spend so much more time tunnelled into these tiny little snippets, then you feel perhaps a little bit more protective of changing it and whatnot. I love to read short stories, and even though I haven't been writing them of late, I have done some sort of judging, reading things for the Scottish Arts Trust and various things like that sort of keep my hand in. I did actually just recently write something for the Australian Fairy Tale Society, which is sort of like quite the other end.
Oh, that sounds interesting. I think you're dabbling in lots of different genres.
Yeah, I do. And it's just kind of fun. But I think with the long form, I do definitely base more on characters. I don't do a lot of plotting like a lot of people do. You know, we were talking before, I don't even know sometimes who the killer is going to be or who's going to do what until I get there. So it's kind of like
it's a
a surprise for me as well. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I always get held back a bit by that. I feel like I need to know the ending before I've started.
Right.
But it actually blocks me from a lot of writing.
Yeah. And it is
chill out, I think.
Yeah, it is quite freeing if you can let yourself do that, I think, if you can just kind of let it go. And yes, sometimes I have written myself into a corner and had to jettison 10,000 words or something, but they're never really wasted because they're still there, and it's just considered, I think of it like practice, so they're still there, those words, when I want to go back to them or whatever. But most of the time it's just, I guess I'm so character driven now. I've done some workshops in the past that are all about, trying to teach how to just invent people and then let them, in a way, tell the story. I know as the author you still have to have a handle on it, but when you know the characters really, really well enough, they're not going to lead you down a garden path because they have to act certain ways if you've fleshed out the character well enough. And so you're less likely to get caught up.
Do you have a bit of a process around how you create your characters? Is it all in your head, or do you put down something in writing about who they are?
These days I travel practically all the time. I'm having a little hiatus at the moment, but my husband and I sold up everything and we've been travelling overseas for about 8 years looking after people's pets and stuff. So I've had to adapt my whole way. Yeah, it's been really, really good fun and probably one of the best things I've ever done. But it was quite daunting at first because, I had my own study. Was surrounded by books. I had the cork board. I had the timelines going and things pasted up on the walls and all of that. And I can't do that anymore. So I think it pushed me into relying even more on the characters, but the characters kind of just come to life in my head now. I spend long enough with them that I don't even have to. I might have little notes, like say for instance in New Girls Play Nice, we have, I say 4 main characters, but really there's probably 6 because there's the dead girl Helen as well. And there's the police detective who's also a female. I was living with them for a long time. I may have had little notes where I would put, well, Rebel doesn't like to eat this or something. Just a few little things like that I might have had written down. But the rest of it really, I'm either living in their head or they're living in my head. I never quite work out what it is. But I think once the first character comes to me, then I sort of know who I want to sort of fill out the cast, if you like. There was a point where I did have 2 of my characters because of the 4 main women. The publishers pointed out, I thought they were all well delineated, but when it was being edited, one of the editors, who are just fabulous, just kind of pointed out that there just didn't seem to be quite enough difference between the 2 older of the women. They're only older by a year or something. And I knew straight away what they were talking about because what I had done was Sue was already this motherly person in my mind. She was the one that, they could all rely on. She lived in her own mother's home and so she was very stable. but then Jackie was the only actual mother in the book. So she has 2 children. And I think it was that motherliness that I was kind of mixing up between the two. And I didn't really want to change their position in the friendship group. But once that was sort of pointed out to me, then I just kind of came up with a few different things for Jackie. Like she had studied English literature and stuff like that at uni, and she married her professor. So I actually made her a bit professorial herself. So when, she could have used a simple word, she would use something a bit, outlandish, or she quotes Shakespeare or Proust or something, so that then showed her big difference. But the others were already all quite different. And yeah, I kind of fall in love with the characters a little bit, and it's really hard for me to get to the end because then I never really want to let them go.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
How do you find when you're writing and you are holding all of that in your head, how is the disconnect when you have to walk away from the laptop and live life?
Yes, it is difficult. It is difficult. And it's a lot easier for me now because I don't have responsibilities, apart from people's pets, which that's a big responsibility, and their house. But I don't have sort of like set timeframes, and I don't have to go to an office and work and all of that, which I, used to try and write around those times. And I know that's what most people have to do, but it's one of the joys of getting older that, I don't have to do all of that anymore. But it is still hard. I do sometimes end up going somewhere to talk about something else entirely, and my mind is just vacant because it was not really vacant. It's vacant in response to respond to what I'm being asked, because it's still filled with all this chattering, in this case of, 4 or 5 women all sort of chattering about what it is they're going to do and what's happening next and all of that. And I do find it hard sometimes. Do you get like, I sort of get so engrossed that I can be a little bit grumpy because somebody's interrupted me. My husband's learned not to say, "Would you like a cup of tea?"
Yeah, I will get kind of engrossed in what I'm doing, and it feels like it's almost like time traveling a bit. Like you suddenly look up and go, "Oh, what's happened?" I get so into what I'm writing. But I also love that feeling when you've written something and you just know it's good, and that feeling that you get. It's like, oh, that feels like I just achieved something. I love that.
And have you ever gone back and read stuff? Sometimes I will go back and read something that I've written and think, gosh, sometimes it'll be, oh dear, this is terrible. I better get rid of that. But quite often it's, wow, this is really good. I can't remember writing something so good,
Oh, I wrote that. I find that when I'm reading something aloud to an audience, I still will get halfway through and a bit shocked that those are my words.
Yeah.
So, I just wish I had more of them. Mine are my really good pieces are few and far between.
Well, I think we must all be the same, because every now and again on Instagram I put up things like of somebody else's writing, and I just call it an excerpt egg, and it'll just be a little passage or a sentence that I really love. And one time I posted something, and someone who I'm obviously, we follow each other on Instagram, and she put a message saying, I started to read it and I thought, gee, this is good. And then she said, and then I realised it was mine.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Now, I'd love to hear how you've got 2 books with Penguin now. How did that journey to publication with Penguin eventuate?
Well, they're actually, so now this is very confusing even for me, because my contract is with Source Books in the USA, and the imprint is Poison Pen Press. So they published the first one, which, got some traction here, but it was set in the States. It wasn't initially when I wrote it. It was written in Australia, but after I got the contract, the editor there was just really lovely. And when we were having a Zoom call, she said, we're a strange lot, us Americans. And the first one was about a serial killer. And she said, we like to think that we're living, that these people are our next door neighbours. And she said, except in your case, heaven forbid. She meant, characters in the book. But so I did rewrite that one to set it there because they were the people that gave me the contract. With the second one, they were happy to take it as, you know, written in it's set in Melbourne. And then Penguin distributes here in Australia. So how all of that works, I have absolutely no idea. Sometimes I rack my brains to think who is, you know, but all I really have to worry about is I've got a great person that I deal with at Penguin in Australia, and I've got fabulous people that I deal with at Source Books in the US, and then I don't worry about the rest of it because they obviously all know what they're doing.
Yes.
And I just write the books.
So when you connected with Source Books, did you just submit directly to their website, or how did you connect with them initially?
Yeah, I did have an agent at the time, and I would not have known. I never would have had any ability to. I don't even think you can submit direct to them without an agent. But now I'm in a position where I can sort of deal directly with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think those kind of things are always easier when you do have an agent because that's the hard part, isn't it? Like none of us like to be really sort of kind of out there, you know, pushing ourselves and in the trenches and all of that. It's one of the hardest things, I think, is to have to, you know, push yourself and your work to somebody. And it's so much easier if someone else is kind of doing that on your behalf, and then you can just work with them. So, yeah.
And was your agent an Australian agent, or did you get an American agent?
Yeah, Australian, yeah.
Fantastic. So it almost went in a circle. You started writing here in Australia, it got published overseas, and now it's all come all the way back.
Yeah. It's crazy, really. You just never know when things are going to happen and how they're going to happen. And you know, most of You Girls Play Nice was, even though a lot of it is set in Melbourne, and that's where I am at the moment, and it's one of my favourite cities in the world, but I basically didn't write any of it when I was here. You know, I may have checked a few things when I've sort of been flying through or whatever, but so in a way it was probably a way to make me feel connected to it still to Australia, because I think the majority of it I remember writing in on a rural property in Ireland, because we had 3 months there looking after a couple of gorgeous puppy dogs.
Oh,
and
that sounds incredible.
Yeah, and so it was really, you know, I mean, apart from, it's just such a joy to be able to settle into somebody's house for a while and not have any of the normal kind of responsibilities and worries that you might have, and just be able to concentrate on what it is that I love to do. And I know one chapter I wrote, a draft of a full chapter was written on a train between Edinburgh and London, and I know some of it was written at a cafe in Paris, and then a lot of the editing was done at my sister's house in Hobart in Tasmania. So it's
all over the world.
Place. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. An international Australian book.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, the title of You Girls Play Nice, was that what it was always going to be?
No, and you know, I can't even. I'm not even quite sure what it was when I sent it in. It was something very boring. I know that, because with the first one of Sister Butcher Sister, that had been called She for some time, and then when they suggested the change of name, I just absolutely loved it. So when I actually sent in You Girls Play Nice under whatever name it was, I just can't quite remember now, but I said to them, you know, I imagine this won't be the title, but I'll be interested to see what you come up with. And what I really liked about them when they came up with that title, and then, because in actual fact, it's usually not a big space between me getting that final title and then seeing the cover. So that's always a really big joy, or the proposed cover anyway. Sometimes there's a few changes. But what I really liked about the title was it kind of spoke to me a little bit about that whole thing where, you know, girls are supposed to be sugar and spice and all things nice, and, you know, you girls play nice. But inside all of us, there's there's other things apart from the nice girl, you know, and whether that's probably not a murderer or whatever, but there's another, at least one other side to us, and sometimes 4 or 5 different aspects to our personality. And so I kind of felt like it was a bit of a dig, you know, at that whole idea of, you know, you girls stay in your place and you be nice and you do what you're told, sort of thing. And then to see that, you know, well, they don't always do that. So
Yeah. Now, I have a few questions for you for my listeners to get to know you a little bit better. What would young Karin think of your career, like if you went back and met yourself as a young woman? I shouldn't say young woman, as if you were in primary school or high school.
yeah.
Would she have expected you to be an author?
I always knew that I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't know how. It was almost in the sort of upbringing that I had, which was not very affluent, and, you know, there wasn't a lot of time for reading books. Was a leisure activity. It wasn't something that, you know, was kind of big in my household. And thank heaven for really good school teachers and for terrific libraries, because that's where I kind of spent a lot of my time. But I never really thought of it as being something that I could do to actually make a living. It was something that I just thought I would be able to dabble in and have fun with. And if I could have told myself, if I could send a letter back to me, I would say, don't do all the other stuff. You know, it was, yes, it was good, and I had some sort of pretty good jobs and stuff like that, and some of it was necessary, but I would have said, just give it a go first, you know, live on noodles and sausages or something for a couple of years and just really give it a go, and don't worry about all that other stuff. But of course, like most people, you know, you get involved with, I guess, what society expects of you, and, you know, you're wanting to buy a house, and then you're having children or getting married or whatever, and all of these things kind of detract. And I think it's why in the past we probably had a lot more successful male writers, because, you know, that saying where behind every great man is a great woman, sort of thing.
Yes.
They have somebody always to look after them and to do things for them. Whereas we've never ever had that. And we sort of feel like all of these other responsibilities are on our shoulders and they all come first. So I guess I would be saying, you know, just turn your back on all of that and just give it a bit of a go. But still, having said that, I also am a bit of a fatalist, you know, where you think, well, things always happen for a reason, and they probably happen in the order that they're supposed to happen. And maybe I wouldn't have had such a good time with it and been so adaptable if I had had more early success. Because sometimes you see that happens too, you know, people have like a really great success with one book, and not just authors, but singers and actors and things. They'll have one really great, and then they're chasing that forever and never quite reaching it again. So sometimes, you know, it is good that you haven't got hugely high expectations of yourself, and then it just happens somehow.
I think too that, like, it's wonderful to have like a great success, but there's also a different in like having a sustainable career. Yeah, I guess you just have to weigh up what you want to do with your writing
Yeah.
work.
And there's not a lot of scope, especially for women, I think, to have a long career like, you know, like a Helen Garner career or whatever. There's only so much space in the field for a certain few to really shine like that. And you know, there are different kinds, like obviously Helen Garner's, you know, her literary work and all of that. And then there's people in the sort of crime thriller, you know, like Frida McFadden, for instance, just writing, you know, there's new ones coming out all the time. But then that's really fascinates me, because she's a surgeon, and I think was still working as a surgeon while writing these. Yeah.
So there is really nothing stopping us from writing if
No.
she can churn them out while she's a surgeon.
Yeah.
Now, for aspiring authors in your genre, would you have any tips or advice that you would share with them?
Well, I think probably I was given a good bit of advice, and I wish I could remember who had given it to me, but it was when I first started doing a little bit of the crime stuff. And the advice was, don't get too worried initially about, is everything right? Is this exactly how it works in a, police building or in like on a crime scene or whatever? Don't get too caught up in it, because you're not writing reality. And, we see things on TV and watch some of these series, and sometimes you'll sort of think to yourself, oh, as if that could happen. And and yes, it probably doesn't happen that way, but if it's written well enough, it doesn't matter. So there are all the sorts of things that maybe you can sort of check out later. I think at one point there's been a couple of times where I've spent too long just trying to get the research right. And sometimes that then gets in the way of the writing. It's a lot easier to write the story and then fix the things that you need to sort of do a bit more research on afterwards, because there's always a way around it. I remember I think it was Stephen King was explaining once about some strange thing. It was probably before DNA or whatever, and he couldn't work out how. So he just kind of made something up that this would happen and this is how they would find out. And in the end, it turned out to be kind of right. But he didn't know that when he's first writing it. You just got to write it. Just do the writing is basically what I would say.
Who knew that to write a story you needed to make it up?
Yeah, that's right.
Now, you've already shared with me that you're an international pet sitter, but is there anything that my listeners would find surprising about you?
Well, I don't know about well, yes, I guess so. There's a few unusual things about how my brain works. So one of them is, I have like they call it dyscalculia, which is like dyslexia, but it's to do with numbers.
Right.
And it doesn't really impede me, but it just makes me panic. So whereas I can work out some things, but if I'm put in a situation and somebody's saying, oh, well, you've got to, change this into this dollar and hand that over here and all of that, I just panic so much, because all I can see is all these numbers swimming around and they make absolutely no sense to me. And then following on from that, I also have, I don't even know if there's a name for it, but I get mixed up with symbols. So like if I have to try and put something together and they give me symbols instead of words, then it just makes no sense to me at all. And I can't tell you how many men's toilets I've walked into after standing outside. Usually at airports, I stand outside for so long staring at these symbols and trying to work out which is the right one. And in the end, they just muddle up. But, men are so cool. You get this one-handed wave. Oh, you're right. Don't worry.
That's not great in an emergency, though, if you have to stop and make a decision. I'd be in trouble. So how do you find with letters, if symbols are numbers and symbols are confusing, but what about letters and words?
No, letters have been fine. I've never had any trouble with, I mean, I'm lazy now, I must say, because the computer age has kind of made us lazier. Spelling can be atrocious sometimes because we don't have to worry about it anymore. Right? And you have set words. I don't know if everybody had, but I have some set words that I'm always checking. I can't even think what some of them are now, but accommodation or something like that. And I'm always.
I was about to say that. I always leave them out.
But I never really had trouble. It's just the numbers. And when my son was in high school, I used to, like most mothers, try and help him with his homework and stuff. Well, he pretty well, worked out even before he ended primary school, not to ask me anything to do with maths, because he would just see me, freeze and not be able to grasp anything. But when he was in, I think probably his second last year of high school, there was actually one time where because I would still sit with him and try to, help out with things or just chat about what the work was. And there was one time when he was explaining something about algebra and he put it in such a way that I had this like probably 30-second moment of thinking, I can do maths. I can understand this, but that was probably the only time. So I sort of gave up after that. And now I just my husband is like a maths whiz. So I can just say, if anybody asks me anything, just a moment, I'll just go and ask my husband.
My dad was a maths and physics teacher, and I'm okay with maths now, but growing up I was definitely not up to, I wasn't going to be in the best maths classes or anything like that.
No.
I would find, the concepts very confusing, and then he would be quite frustrated that I didn't understand. And yet with reading, it was like, I don't even recall learning to read. It just feels like I always have been able to. And it's very interesting how our brains work, and that we can pick up something so quickly, and other things can be so challenging.
Yeah. I also have a very mild sort of synesthesia, so that my senses get mixed up sometimes, like I'll see something and I think I can smell it instead of just seeing it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I probably the most noticeable is if I'm really, really moved by something, say a piece of artwork or whatever, I can usually hear music. So if there's lots of dark blues and things in the piece of artwork, I can nearly always hear piano like Bach or something like that. Yeah, so I'm quite fascinated.
That'd be a lovely experience, I think. I haven't experienced myself, so I can only imagine.
Yeah.
But I do know that sometimes, like, I like that feeling, like sometimes when you're in a church or you hear a beautiful piece of music, or like your heart just soars, or you see like a beautiful view at the beach or on top of a mountain, and it just, you feel uplifted. But I wouldn't say that I experience any other sense than the one that you're meant to feel.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to have music playing at the same time as seeing something beautiful.
It's funny the things that will mess with me, like how you walk past in a market or something and they'll have those candles that look like a piece of cake. And I have to just look away because everything's muddled up in my head and I don't know whether to pick it up and eat it or.
My dad and my son are both colorblind, and there'd be times where I'd be like, so what can you see? What is different? And they're like, we can't actually tell you. We know we're colorblind, but we can't, we've never seen what you've seen, so it's difficult for us to convey.
Yeah.
We know it, we see something different.
And is it mainly red and green? But
yeah. But my poor little guy, we'd be teaching him the colours, and we'd say, what's that colour? And he would say yellow. And I'm like, that's not yellow. And then he'd get angry. It's yellow.
Yeah.
And then we realised, it's because he's not seeing what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been such a great chat. Thank you so much. We've gone in lots of different directions.
We have. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, and I haven't had time to sit down and read yet, but the cover has lured me in, and your description now of the book has definitely lured me in.
You'll have to let me know what you think. Love
it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Ky. Bye.
Totally Lit is an independent podcast. You can help support us to continue to chat with wonderful Australian creatives by leaving a review on iTunes or sharing our socials with your friends. You can also make a contribution at www.buymeacoffee.com/totally-lit. This will also help with equipment and podcasting platform fees. I love to interact with our listeners, so feel free to say hello either by email or social media at totallylitpodcast@gmail.com, or you can find me on Facebook, Insta, LinkedIn and Twitter, and now Blue Sky. I've also created a group on Facebook called the Totally Lit Writing Community. It's a space to continue the conversation and share your writing successes, events, launches and latest projects. Jump into the group and say hello. Thank you for listening to Totally Lit, and don't forget to go out into the world to read, write, create, ignite.